Chapter 12. Seasonal Schism. Town Division. Sabrina awoke to a Hallowville she barely recognized. As she stepped out onto her porch, she blinked in disbelief at the sight before her. The town had transformed overnight into a patchwork of conflicting seasonal displays. To her left, a yard exploded with vibrant spring flowers, tulips, and daffodils swaying in a magically warm breeze. To her right, an elaborate Halloween scene, complete with animatronic skeletons and glowing jack-o'-lanterns, stood in stark contrast. Quill chirped anxiously from her shoulder, its quills shifting between pastel spring hues and deep autumnal oranges. Sabrina stroked the hedgehog's back, trying to soothe both her familiar and herself. "I know, Quill. This is worse than we thought." As she made her way down the street, the division became even more apparent. Neighbors who had once chatted amiably over fences now glared at each other from their respective seasonal territories. The very air seemed charged with tension, spring pollen and autumn leaves swirling in conflicting patterns. Suddenly, a commotion caught her attention. Two neighbors, Mr. Bloom and Mrs. Hallowell, were engaged in a heated argument at the border of their properties. Mr. Bloom's yard was a riot of spring flowers, while Mrs. Hallowell's was a miniature pumpkin patch, complete with a few precocious jack-o'-lanterns grinning from atop their vines. "Your oversized daisies are crowding out my pumpkins," Mrs. Hallowell shouted, waving a gnarled finger at the offending flowers. "Well, your pumpkin vines are strangling my prized roses," Mr. Bloom retorted, his face as red as the roses in question. Sabrina hurried over, placing herself between the feuding neighbors. Now, she said, trying to keep her voice calm and authoritative. "I'm sure we can find a compromise here." Both neighbors turned to her, their expressions a mix of frustration and hope. Sabrina took a deep breath, focusing on the conflicting energies swirling around them. With a subtle gesture, she coaxed the daisies to lean away from the property line while simultaneously encouraging the pumpkin vines to curl back towards Mrs. Hallowell's yard. "There," Sabrina said with a smile. "How's that? Each plant has its own space now." Mr. Bloom and Mrs. Hallowell looked at their adjusted gardens, then at each other. The tension in their shoulders eased slightly. "I suppose that's acceptable," Mrs. Hallowell grudgingly admitted. Mr. Bloom nodded. "Yes, thank you, Sabrina. We may have gotten a bit carried away." As Sabrina continued her walk through town, her phone buzzed. It was Noah. "Sabrina, it's chaos out here." Noah's voice crackled through the speaker. "I've got calls coming in left and right about magical disturbances and property disputes. Can you meet me at the town square?" "On my way," Sabrina replied, picking up her pace. When she arrived at the square, she found Noah looking harried, his usually neat uniform rumpled. He was surrounded by a group of agitated citizens, all talking over each other. "One at a time, please," Noah was saying, holding up his hands. Sabrina joined him, and together they began addressing the concerns of the townspeople. They moved from group to group, mediating conflicts with a combination of Noah's steady authority and Sabrina's subtle magical interventions. As they worked, Sabrina couldn't help but notice the way Noah's presence seemed to calm not just the people, but the very magic in the air around them. She filed that observation away for later consideration. Their efforts were interrupted by a sudden burst of laughter and shrieks from the nearby playground. A group of children stood in a circle, watching in a mix of delight and alarm as their toys zoomed around them, very much alive. A teddy bear was doing cartwheels, a toy robot was marching in erratic patterns, and a stuffed unicorn was attempting to fly with its stubby plush wings. The magical energy emanating from the animated toys was a chaotic blend of spring and Halloween magic. Sabrina approached the group, Quill perched on her shoulder. She knelt down to the children's level, smiling reassuringly. "Hey there," she said softly. "Looks like your toys are having quite the party. Mind if I join in?" The children nodded, eyes wide with wonder. Sabrina closed her eyes, reaching out with her magic to sense the conflicting energies animating the toys. She began to hum softly, a melody that seemed to resonate with both the brightness of spring and the mystery of Halloween. As she hummed, she wove her fingers in intricate patterns, guiding the magical energies into a more harmonious flow. Gradually, the toys began to slow their frantic movements. The teddy bear settled into a gentle swaying dance. The robot's march became a rhythmic step. and the unicorn floated gently to the ground. The children gasped in delight, and Sabrina opened her eyes to find not just the kids, but a crowd of adults watching in awe. She noticed with satisfaction that the onlookers were a mix of spring and Halloween supporters, all united in their appreciation of her display. As Sabrina stood, brushing off her knees, Noah approached with a smile. "Nice work," he said quietly, "but we've got another situation at the farmer's market. Think you're up for it?" Sabrina nodded, and they made their way to the market. The scene that greeted them was one of utter chaos. Produce was magically shifting between seasons before their eyes. Pumpkins swelled and shrank, transforming into spring melons and back again. Apples ripened and withered on their branches, while spring berries appeared and disappeared in baskets. Vendors and customers alike were engaged in heated arguments, each claiming ownership of the constantly changing produce. The air crackled with conflicting magical energies, threatening to spark into something more dangerous. Noah stepped forward, his voice cutting through the din. "Everyone, please remain calm," he called out. "We're going to sort this out, but I need everyone to take a step back from the produce." As Noah began to organize the crowd, Sabrina focused on the shifting produce. She reached out with her magic, trying to stabilize the fluctuating energies. It was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with her bare hands, but slowly she began to make progress. Sweat beaded on her brow as she worked, guiding the chaotic magic into a more stable pattern. Gradually, the produce settled into a compromise state, each item reflecting a perfect blend of spring and autumn characteristics. As the magical storm calmed, Sabrina became aware of the hush that had fallen over the market. She opened her eyes to find everyone staring at her in amazement. The vendors and customers who had been arguing moments before now stood side by side, marveling at the unique produce before them. Noah joined her, a look of pride and concern on his face. "You did it," he said softly. "But this is getting worse, isn't it?" Sabrina nodded, feeling the weight of the town's fate on her shoulders. "The division isn't just disagreement anymore," she said. "It's a physical manifestation of the magical imbalance, and it's growing stronger by the hour." As they looked out over the now calm market, Sabrina and Noah shared a grim look. The pressure to find a solution was mounting, and they both knew that time was running out for Hallowville. Artifact leads Sabrina and Noah exchanged a determined look as they left the farmer's market. The chaos they had just witnessed only reinforced the urgency of their mission. With Quill perched attentively on Sabrina's shoulder, they set off to follow the leads from the magical map Sabrina had memorized during the secret meeting. Their first stop was an old antique shop tucked away in a quiet corner of Hallowville. As they approached, they noticed the window display shifting erratically. One moment it showcased delicate spring flowers in crystal vases. The next, it transformed into a spooky Halloween scene with cobwebs and jack-o'-lanterns. "Well, that's certainly not subtle," Noah remarked as they pushed open the creaky door. Inside, the shop was a whirlwind of magical chaos. Objects on the shelves flickered between spring and Halloween themes, creating a dizzying effect. A porcelain figurine of a young girl holding a bouquet suddenly became a miniature witch stirring a cauldron, then back again. The shop owner, an elderly man with twinkling eyes and a mischievous smile, approached them. "Ah, visitors, here to browse our ever-changing inventory," he chuckled. Sabrina stepped forward, her voice low. "We're actually here about something specific, something old, powerful, and currently in pieces." The old man's eyes narrowed, his jovial demeanor shifting to one of caution. "Ah, you speak of the artifact, a dangerous thing to seek, young witch." Noah joined the conversation. "We're trying to prevent a magical catastrophe. Any information you have could be crucial." The shop owner nodded slowly, stroking his beard. "The artifact has a long and complex history. It was created to maintain balance, but in the wrong hands." He trailed off, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. "Let's just say it could tip the scales permanently." Sabrina leaned in, intrigued. "Do you know where we might find any pieces?" The old man's eyes twinkled again. "I may have something that could help, but be warned, knowledge comes at a price." He shuffled to the back of the shop, returning moments later with an ornate wooden box. As he opened it, Quill suddenly bristled, its quills standing on end. Inside the box was a fragment of what appeared to be an ancient parchment. The shop owner carefully lifted it out. This is part of a text that speaks of the artifact's creation and purpose. It may guide you to what you seek. As Sabrina reached for the parchment, Quill let out a soft chirp. Its quills began to glow with a pulsating magical energy. The shop owner's eyes widened in surprise. "Your familiar seems quite attuned to the artifact's magic," he mused. "That could be both a blessing and a curse." Sabrina gently took the parchment, feeling a tingle of magic course through her fingers. She and Noah pored over the text, their eyes widening as they deciphered the ancient script. "It says the artifact was split into multiple pieces," Sabrina whispered, "to protect it from those who would abuse its power." Noah nodded grimly. "And it looks like each piece has its own unique magical signature." They spent the next hour carefully transcribing and translating what they could of the text. The shop owner watched them with a mixture of curiosity and concern, occasionally offering cryptic comments that seemed to raise more questions than answers. As they prepared to leave, the old man placed a hand on Sabrina's arm. "Be careful, young witch. The path you're on is fraught with danger. Not everyone in Hallowville wants balance maintained." Sabrina nodded solemnly. "We understand. Thank you for your help." Once outside, Sabrina and Noah huddled together, comparing notes. Noah pulled out his phone, scrolling through recent reports. "I've got some contacts in the magical community who've been keeping an eye out for unusual activity," he explained. "There have been several incidents that might indicate the presence of an artifact piece." They spent the next hour creating a detailed map of Hallowville, marking potential locations where the scattered artifact pieces might be hidden. Each clue they uncovered seemed to reveal more about the artifact's true power and the scale of the opposing faction's plan. "It's not just about shifting the seasons," Sabrina mused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This artifact could potentially rewrite the very magical fabric of Hallowville." Noah nodded grimly. "And if it falls into the wrong hands, we could lose everything that makes this town special." As they finalized their plan to search for the first piece, Sabrina felt a sudden chill run down her spine. She glanced around, her magical senses on high alert. "Noah," she whispered, "I think we're being watched." Noah's hand instinctively moved to his hip, where his badge rested. "I feel it too. Unseen eyes." Quill bristled on Sabrina's shoulder, its quills glowing faintly as it sensed the hidden presence. They stood back to back, scanning the seemingly empty street. The shadows seemed to shift and move in unnatural ways, and there was a palpable sense of magical energy in the air. "Whoever you are," Sabrina called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "show yourself." Festival tensions. The halfway to Halloween festival transformed Hallowville's town square into a surreal wonderland. Spring flowers and pumpkins stood side by side, while pastel ribbons intertwined with cobwebs. The air hummed with an electric mixture of competing magics, setting everyone's nerves on edge. Sabrina and Noah wove through the crowd, their casual demeanor belying their true purpose. They paused at various booths, sampling treats and playing games, all while keeping their senses attuned to the magical undercurrents flowing through the festival grounds. "It's like walking through two different realities," Sabrina murmured, watching a group of children chase enchanted butterflies past a witch stirring a smoking cauldron. Noah nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd, and both sides seemed determined to outdo each other. They approached a spring magic display where a young witch with flowers braided into her hair stood before a bare patch of earth. With a flourish of her hands, colorful blooms erupted from the soil, eliciting gasps and applause from the onlookers. Not to be outdone, the Halloween booth across the way sprang into action. A warlock in a pointed hat waved his wand, and a pile of small pumpkins came to life. The gourds sprouted spindly legs and began to dance, their carved faces grinning mischievously. Sabrina felt a familiar tingle at the base of her skull. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her magical senses. Beneath the flashy displays, she could feel hidden currents of power pulsing through the festival grounds. "Noah," she whispered, "there's something else going on here. These magical displays are just the surface." Before Noah could respond, a commotion erupted nearby. Two men were shouting at each other, their faces red with anger. One wore a t-shirt emblazoned with a bright sun, while the other sported a jack-o'-lantern pin. Your spring magic is ruining this town, the Halloween supporter yelled. We're losing our identity. It's time for change, the other man retorted. Hallowville needs to grow and evolve. Noah quickly stepped between them, his hands raised. Gentlemen, please, this is a celebration for everyone. Let's keep things civil. The men glared at each other, but backed down under Noah's stern gaze. As they walked away, Sabrina caught snippets of hushed conversations from the dispersing crowd. During the main event, perfect opportunity to show them, won't know what hit them. Sabrina and Noah exchanged worried glances. It was clear that both factions were planning something big, using the festival as cover for their schemes. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the square, Sabrina spotted a familiar group near the center of the festival. Her magic class students had set up a small booth, and a crowd was gathering to watch their demonstration. Curious, Sabrina and Noah made their way over. The students stood in a circle, their faces a mix of concentration and excitement. At a signal from the eldest student, they began to weave their magic together. Streams of golden autumn light twined with the fresh green of spring. Leaves sprouted and changed color in midair, while flowers bloomed and transformed into glowing jack-o'-lanterns. It was a beautiful display of balanced magic, showcasing the harmony between the seasons. For a moment, the divided crowd seemed to forget their differences. Spring and Halloween supporters alike watched in awe as the students' magic danced before them. Sabrina felt a surge of pride in her students' abilities and their wisdom in choosing such a unifying display. As night fell in earnest, the magical energies that had been building throughout the day began to intensify. Sabrina felt it like a pressure in her chest, a tingling along her skin. Around the festival, unpredictable effects began to manifest. A row of spring flower garlands suddenly wilted and regrew as twisting vines covered in tiny jack-o'-lanterns. A cauldron of mulled cider began to bubble and glow, the steam forming eerie shapes in the air. Children's face paint shifted and changed of its own accord, spring butterflies transforming into bats and back again. This is getting out of hand, Noah muttered, watching as a group of enchanted pumpkins began to roll through the crowd, leaving trails of blooming flowers in their wake. Sabrina nodded, her face grim. The competing magics are feeding off each other, growing stronger and more unstable. If we don't do something soon... She didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew that they were running out of time to prevent a potentially catastrophic magical event. The very fabric of Hallowville's reality seemed to be stretching thin, ready to tear at any moment. We need to find those artifact pieces, Sabrina said, her voice low and urgent. It's the only way to restore balance before it's too late. Noah agreed, his hand unconsciously moving to his badge. But how do we slip away without drawing attention? Both sides are watching us closely. As if in answer to their dilemma, a loud bang echoed across the square. A spring magic display had misfired, sending a shower of luminous pollen into the air. In the ensuing chaos and confusion, Sabrina grabbed Noah's hand. Now's our chance, she whispered. Let's go. Artifact pieces. Sabrina and Noah slipped away from the chaotic festival, following a faint magical trail that only Sabrina could sense. The air around them seemed to shimmer with conflicting energies, spring and autumn magic battling for dominance. It's getting stronger, Sabrina whispered, her eyes narrowed in concentration. I think we're close. They found themselves back in the town square, now eerily quiet compared to the festive atmosphere they'd left behind. In the center stood a statue of Hallowville's founder, its weathered stone face gazing sternly over the empty plaza. Noah frowned, circling the statue. Are you sure this is the place? It looks... normal. Sabrina approached the statue, her hand outstretched. As her fingers neared the stone, she felt a pulse of energy, like a heartbeat. It's here, she said confidently, hidden inside. With a wave of her hand, Sabrina cast a revealing spell. The statue shimmered, and a small compartment appeared in its base. Inside, nestled among cobwebs and dust, lay a gleaming object. As Sabrina reached for it, a voice rang out. Stop right there. They whirled to see a figure emerge from the shadows. It was Jasmine Green, a vocal supporter of the Spring Magic faction. Her eyes blazed with magical energy, and flowers seemed to bloom at her feet with each step. That doesn't belong to you, Jasmine said, her voice cold. Step away from the statue. Noah moved protectively in front of Sabrina. Jasmine, you don't understand. We're trying to restore balance to Hallowville. This artifact piece is crucial. Jasmine's laugh was bitter. Balance? We're done with balance. It's time for Hallowville to embrace change, to step into an eternal spring. Magical energy crackled around her hands, and Sabrina knew they were moments away from a confrontation. She had to think fast. Jasmine, Sabrina said calmly, stepping out from behind Noah. Look around you. Can't you feel how unstable the magic has become? This isn't about choosing sides, it's about preserving Hallowville itself. As she spoke, Sabrina subtly wove a spell, drawing on the conflicting energies around them. The air shimmered, and suddenly the town square was transformed. One half burst into vibrant spring bloom, while the other took on the rich hues of autumn. In the center, where they stood, the two seasons merged in a breathtaking display of magical harmony. Jasmine's eyes widened, her aggressive stance faltering. How did you do that? This is what Hallowville should be, Sabrina explained, her voice gentle but firm. A perfect balance of both magics, not one dominating the other. That's what this artifact can help us achieve. For a moment, Jasmine seemed to waver. Then, with a frustrated growl, she turned and fled, disappearing into the night. Noah let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Quick thinking, he said, squeezing Sabrina's shoulder. That could have gone much worse. Sabrina nodded, then turned back to the statue. Carefully, she reached into the compartment and withdrew the artifact piece. It was a small, intricately carved piece of metal, pulsing with magical energy. As she held it, visions flashed through her mind. Glimpses of Hallowville's past, of rituals performed to maintain the delicate balance of seasons. It's incredible, she breathed. This piece, it's like a key to controlling the flow of seasonal magic, but it's not complete. We need to find the other pieces to fully restore balance. Noah's radio crackled to life, interrupting her thoughts. All units, we have reports of multiple magical disturbances across town, situation escalating rapidly, requesting all available personnel to respond. They exchanged worried glances. The magical instability, Sabrina said. It must be accelerating now that we've removed this piece from its hiding place. They hurried through the streets, responding to the most urgent calls. As they moved, Sabrina's magical senses were on high alert. She began to notice places where the magical energy seemed to concentrate. An old well in the park, the weather vane atop the town hall, the stained glass window of the library. Noah, she said between breaths as they ran, I think I'm sensing the other artifact pieces. They're hidden all around town, in places of significance. Before Noah could respond, a massive explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. They stumbled, turning to see a pillar of magical energy erupting from the festival grounds. Oh no, Sabrina gasped. The column of light split, one half shimmering with the pastels of spring, the other dark and foreboding like a Halloween night. Where the two magics met, reality itself seemed to warp and twist. Noah's face was grim. Looks like both factions have made their move. We're out of time. Sabrina clutched the artifact piece tightly, feeling its power pulse in sync with the chaotic energies swirling around them. Then we'd better move fast, she said, determination in her voice. We need to find those other pieces before Hallowville tears itself apart. As they raced towards the epicenter of the magical conflict, Sabrina's mind whirled with possibilities. The artifact piece they'd recovered had shown her glimpses of its power, but also its limitations. Alone, it wasn't enough to restore balance. They needed the complete artifact, and they needed it soon. The streets of Hallowville had become a battleground of seasons. Here, a block was covered in a thick layer of autumn leaves, while just across the street, spring flowers burst through cracks in the pavement. Citizens ran in panic or huddled in doorways, watching in disbelief as their town transformed around them. Sabrina and Noah pressed on, guided by the urgent crackle of the police radio and Sabrina's growing magical senses. With each step, she could feel the pull of the other artifact pieces, calling out to the one she carried. They were close, so close, but with the town in chaos, finding them would be more challenging than ever.